Hey there everyone. For a long time, one of my favorite aspects of video gaming has been collecting. Not only do I get to play awesome games of all different shapes and sizes, but I get to meet some super cool people as I hunt down new adventures. Collecting has taken me to stores and places I'd have never gone to otherwise, conventions I might have never gone to but are now almost ritual to attend, and led me to people who I first met through selling and trading, but quickly became good friends. I've always tried to collect games I either played and knew were good, or heard were good and wanted to try myself. Though I'll admit, I have plenty that were either bad but I have nostalgia towards, or were decent enough for the price I paid. Unfortunately, many of us know too well that ridiculously high prices often keep us away from games we really want. I'm sure we've all got at least one game that's well out of our price range, but for one reason or another, we'd love to own a copy of it. Today I wanted to talk about those kinds of games. Let's say you wake up tomorrow and money is no object. Or maybe your first lottery check finally showed up. Or, as it's been discussed many times before, the retro gaming bubble bursts and prices drop to unprecedented lows. What are those games you'd rush out and pick up? Let's see if any of mine are on your list too. If you're a collector and someone mentions the high cost of collecting, one of the first systems to come to mind is probably the Sega Saturn. With a library of excellent but limited quantity games and no reliable emulation out there, Saturn games have gone way up in value over the last 10 years, making many of its best games unavailable to those of us whose cash flow is more of a trickling creek. Surprisingly though, I've only got a few Saturn games on my list. The first is definitely Panzer Dragoon Saga. This amazing RPG is one very few have experienced, which is a shame because it's an unbelievable adventure, rivaling even the might of Final Fantasy VII in quality. I've only had the chance to play through it once, but I've wanted to replay it for a very long time now. Unfortunately, the story is that the game's source code was lost, so a port is next to impossible, which keeps the original's price high enough to be well out of our hands. The next game on my list is one I have some great memories of, Saturn Bomberman. With 2 multi-taps, this game actually supports up to 10 players, which can be crazy hectic and crazy fun. Bomberman games are usually enjoyable, so I wasn't surprised to see this go up in value. But hundreds of dollars was more than I was expecting. The last game for the Saturn is going to be one I felt was a great game, but never expected to climb much in value, Shining Wisdom. It was a fantastic Zelda-style overhead game, with a beautiful and colorful world that looks almost like an enhanced Super Nintendo game, which believe me, I say as a compliment. In truth though, it wasn't the longest or most impressive game by many standards, so the fact that it's often priced in the $150 range is a bit of a shock. Moving on from the Saturn, the Sega CD is another system with notoriously high prices for its games, even though many people, from casual collectors to hardcore gamers who don't collect much, have never heard of them. I've only got 2 games on my list of games I'd love to have, and it's worth mentioning these are the only 2 games on my list that I've never played. The first is Popful Mail. Developed by Falcom in 1991, this 2D side-scroller always piqued my interest when I passed ads for it in magazines. But since I didn't get a Sega CD until well after its price had already climbed, I never got a chance to check it out. I've always wanted to though, so I try to keep my eye out for it, hoping I catch a great deal someday. I first found out about this next game, Kyo Flying Squadron, when I picked up the sequel to it on the import Saturn. That game made me want to check out the first one, but I was heartbroken to see it go for upwards of $700, and now it's closer to $1,200. Even if the retro bubble was to burst, that game would probably still be out of my reach, but it's nice to dream, right? Next up is the Super Nintendo. Now I've been collecting for a while, so I'm fortunate to have many of my favorite games on the system already. The 2 games I do mention are both games that I've only learned about a few years ago, and like the Sega CD games, their prices were already too high for me. The first is EVO, or Evo, Search for Eden. It's a very unique adventure game where, as you travel and develop your abilities, your form will evolve and change accordingly. It's an interesting concept that makes for a cool game. Check it out when you've got the time. The next game you may have heard of, Wild Guns. It's an action-packed Western-themed arcade-style shooter, but with robots carrying Gatling guns. What's not to like? Well, besides the nearly $200 price tag. I absolutely love collecting for the NES, but again, I'm lucky to have most of the games I really want, even though I do dream of a complete NES collection someday. If you can believe it though, there's only one game on my list for the NES, and that's Metal Storm. This is such a good game. It's already a tough as nails platformer that doesn't pull punches, but your character also has the ability to flip gravity and progress upside down, and that adds a new and very challenging dimension to the game, even if it does take a bit of getting used to. If you've ever played Portal, you'll know what I'm talking about. The last game on my list is for the PS1. Tales of Destiny is a great RPG and a great series of RPGs that I fell in love with when I first played, but like many of the others on this list, it didn't belong to me, so my time with it was limited and I never got to finish it. I've been wanting a copy of my own, but not only is the price a bit too high for me, they're actually pretty uncommon to find in the wild. The good news is that prices seem to have dropped slightly for this one, so a copy could be in my future. Not the near future, just the future. I'd like to thank you all for listening to what is basically a wish list of games for if and when either the retro bubble bursts or one of these Powerball tickets finally pays off. Let me know if any of my games are on your list or what games you'd love that I didn't mention. As always, have a great day and happy gaming.